everyone. Thank you very much for coming today. I'm Starback, Director of the Office of Postdoctoral Services, and I'd like to invite you to the third panel discussion in our series on the academic job search. This series is co-sponsored by the Graduate School and the Duke Career Center. Upcoming events in the series include how to construct your CV, cover letter, research and teaching statements, negotiating the job offer, and the tech-savvy job search. For dates and times, you can go to the Postdoc Services website, postdoc.duke.edu. Today's panel discussion is on faculty careers beyond Duke. Our guests are faculty from schools that focus on both teaching and research, and they will discuss applying, interviewing, and negotiating for positions at their respective institutions. And they'll also discuss the split between teaching and research. Many of you submitted your questions online, so thank you very much for doing that. We'll start with those questions and then open the floor to questions from the audience. I will ask that you keep your questions general in nature. If you have a question that is very specific to your personal situation, please wait until the end. We'll make sure to stop the discussion at 10:15 so that you can have time to ask panelists questions one-on-one. And now I would like to thank our panelists for taking time, not only taking time out of their schedule, but actually like getting on I-40 or whatever awful road in the morning. We've been fighting with all the traffic and school buses to come here to Duke. We very much appreciate you taking the time to share your advice with our postdocs and graduate students. And our panelists are Jason Andrus, Associate Professor of Biological Sciences at Meredith College, Antonio Izzo, Assistant Professor of Biology at Elon University, Garrett Love, Assistant Professor of Environmental Earth and Geospatial Sciences, North Carolina Central University, and Kathy Zarula, Discipline Chair for Science, Durham Tech Community College. So I'm going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, briefly talk about how they got their positions, what led them from, well, at least in one case we have a Duke PhD, to their current positions, and then we'll start with the questions that were submitted online. Who would like to start? Would you like to start, Kathy?
No, of course.
We're going to go from the reverse end of the alphabet.
That's good. No, I don't know what you're doing to me there. Anyway, I've known Kathy for a long time. So my name is Jason Andrus. Just kind of a little bit of background. I got my PhD at NC State in microbiology. When I finished that, at that time I had an idea I wanted to teach. I really enjoyed doing the TA. And I was very fortunate, and this is something just to kind of pass some advice, the importance of networking, especially it works in academics, at primary teaching institutions just as much as anything else. I got to know Kathy, who's also an alum of our department, and really Kathy got my career the biggest jump start it needed, where she basically said, would you like to teach cell biology in an evening class? And my advisor was gracious enough to let me do that, and so that began actually my first experience actually with coursework. So I did that for about 3 years. I did a semester over 3 years. Each year I did one semester teaching over there in the evening. Really loved it. I went on to do a postdoc at Chapel Hill, and I was in the genetics department there. I had another advisor that was very gracious and let me keep doing this. And it was about that time I realized that was where my focus was. I liked doing the research, but I was getting a little tired and burned out from it, and worrying about grant dollars and all that kind of stuff. It was about the same time where I applied for a position in the Inspire program, which is a postdoctoral training program both in research and education at UNC Chapel Hill. It was in its third year when I got in. It was a 3-year program. I spent my 2 years doing that, 1 year doing research in the lab. The next year, during that time, you get a lot of pedagogy, which is the science of education. I got a lot of training in that. And then I spent a year as a visiting professor as part of my training at UNC Pembroke. So I spent my first full year as a faculty member there teaching introductory to biology and as well as teaching a class that I designed over there. They offered me a position, which was great, except there's no way I was going to live in Lumberton or Pembroke, so that wasn't going to happen. My wife was not real keen on the idea either, so I just hit the job market at the same time. I had a few job interviews, a couple on site, and I got my first position was at Augusta State University, which is now, I think, Georgia Regents University down in Augusta, Georgia, which is a small college there. It was a state school. It was a really interesting place to teach. It actually reminded me a lot of Durham Tech. We used to jokingly call it was a reclamation school, that most of the kids were from Augusta, but they had gone to either Georgia Southern, UGA, had a very good time. The mom and dad decided that was not where they needed to be, so they usually came back. And it was very fun, a lot of non-traditional students, a lot of students. There's a big medical college, and Medical College of Georgia's there, and so a lot of our students were also transitioning through a 2+2 program to get healthcare type careers, so that was it was a really interesting experience. Augusta wasn't the best place for myself and my family. I think it had the 8th worst school district in the country when I was there, so we wanted to come back to the area as soon as possible. And a position at Meredith College opened up about 6 years ago, and I applied and got that, and so we've been here ever since.
My name's Garrett Love. I actually graduated from Duke 2000, PhD in civil environmental engineering. I had known I was going to do teaching, or actually I went back to grad school purposely for teaching because I taught with Teach for America for 3 years. I know Teach for America is getting a lot of voice both ways, but I was in there on like the very second core when they were still trying to figure things out. So I had a little bit of a teaching experience. When I graduated, I actually went into work with a nonprofit. You know, I should have gotten an engineering job, but I went to work for a nonprofit, the Schroeder Education Foundation, which is in Durham. Basically, they promote using computational science in the classroom. And so I spent a lot of time actually teaching professors, teaching high school teachers, writing curriculum for middle school, stuff like that. So I did a lot of teaching stuff and got involved in educational-based grants. And then North Carolina Central had a group of professors who were interested in creating a program in computational science, an undergraduate program, and so I got connected there. And then I ended up in a department of geography, which didn't have a lot to do with my particular degree setup, but they got merged with a program in environmental science, and that's why the big long environmental earth and geospatial science name next to things. And I've been teaching there now for 8 years. Unfortunately, the computational science program that I was brought on to bring never kind of actually was able to matriculate, mostly due to some politics and lots of turnover at the administrative level. So I've had a very different experience than sort of I expected to be there, but I really do enjoy teaching there at Central right now, and I have some interesting stories that we can get into later.
Antonio Iso in the biology department at Elon University, which is a small private liberal arts college. I'm going to quickly start my path to tell you about how I went back into graduate school for a master's at a school that focused on education at the time, University of Northern Colorado. And at the time wanted to go back in for high school teaching, so I took a bunch of training leading up to there. Was horrified when I got into the high school classroom. I'd also been teaching college students at the time. I said, nah, I think college students is a better fit for me. And then so that was always, at that point, definitely ready to be teaching college students. That was sort of the mindset. Went on for a PhD at University of California at Berkeley, and was out there for about 6 years. Did a little bit of teaching while I was there. It's just sort of the standard TAing for different classes, but had some good mentors along the way. Got to experience 1,000-person introductory biology classes and what that sort of thing is all about, and fairly challenging scenarios there. After finishing at Cal, in that last year, I had started applying to schools and started looking sort of at a wide range of jobs at that point. Nothing really happened at that stage, but started up a postdoc with the USDA and was out in Washington for about 3 years. And also during that time, really had not been doing any teaching. It was fairly isolated, not a whole lot of options out there. But while I was out there, started doing a lot of applications. Really was targeting, quite honestly, I'm embarrassed to say, a place exactly like Elon. I really feel like I was incredibly fortunate to sort of stumble into this position, but was really prepared to take on a wide range of positions, ranging all the way from full research only kind of scenarios like USDA to big R1s to places more like Elon. And like I said, it just kind of worked out that way. Interviewed many different kinds of places along the way as well, and it was really interesting to see some of the similarities and the differences between them, and we talk about that some other time later on here as well. But at this point now, I'm at Elon University, been there for about 6 years.
My path wasn't so purposeful. As Jay mentioned, I got my PhD at NC State, and my husband and I were always a year apart in finishing or starting something, so he was here at Duke doing a postdoc, which he had not finished when I finished my PhD, so I came to Duke to do a postdoc. And my funding terminated at the end of my postdoc, and he got offered a research position in another department, so I was geographically trapped. And this happens to a lot of people. So I knew I wanted to be in teaching. I was not sad when my funding ended, I must say. Duke was nice, but it wasn't the place for me. And I was hired by UNCG, actually. This predates the college transfer programs in community colleges. So I was hired by UNCG to do outreach teaching at community colleges. And that's how I got involved with community colleges in the first place. So I taught at 3 different community colleges because they had little agreements with UNCG. And I ended up accepting a position at Durham Tech. I like college teaching better. I had tried the high school route too, but that was definitely not for me. I like teaching the older students that we get and the mixed bag of students that we get at a community college, as opposed to just 18 to 22-year-olds that are very homogeneous. I have taught for the last 15 years. I've taught off and on in the summer at NC State, a 300 level microbiology class. So it's a different caliber of students, it's a different level of material, but they're nice, they're lovely students, but they're not as interesting as the adults and the very interesting collection of students you get at a community college. The majority of my students are seeking a career change. So they bring a lot to the table, but they've decided they don't want to work in accounting anymore, they want to go to pharmacy school or something like that. So I've been at, several different community colleges, and I've been at a university, and I wouldn't trade my position. And I have to be honest, summers off is really nice. It's really nice. It's very child friendly, to teach 9 months and have summers off. You don't have to spend the summer writing grants and trying to chase down money and do, a year's worth of research in 3 months. So it's a very nice lifestyle.
Great, thank you. Those were wonderful introductions. So I talked to a lot of postdocs who have not had the opportunity to teach since they were TA in graduate school. What can they do to demonstrate to a search committee at a school like yours that they can teach, or are there opportunities that you can think of for them to pick up teaching experience?
I'll say, I had a lot of teaching experience when I came in, and I'm a little bit of a snob about it in the case that, yes, when I was working in graduate school, I realized that a lot of my colleagues hadn't had any teaching experience, and there wasn't a lot of opportunity to do it. I got a little bit of a benefit that the year I graduated, I knew I was staying in the area, and I went to work for the nonprofit, but my advisor at the time said, hey, do you want to teach a class? That would be an opportunity for you to actually get something on your resume that actually works. So it may be worth it if you're in the last semester to sort of ask somebody, hey, can I actually take responsibility for teaching this class, or take more responsibility than I'm doing, so that you actually see what it looks like and have a better sense for what's going on there. That's the first thing. Second thing, there are a fair number, particularly in this region, and if you want me to, I can connect you with the Shutter Education Foundation as an example, places where you can volunteer to work with middle schoolers or high schoolers. And I know both of my colleagues here have sort of said high school is very different, but in many ways, when you end up teaching general education college classes, it's not as different as you might think. And so having some experience just learning some of those details, yes, there are classroom management issues you deal with middle schoolers that you don't deal with in the college level usually, but it gives you an opportunity to sort of set down your thoughts and lay them out and understand that you have to explain things. The thing I find in most of my colleagues that they don't have is the ability to explain things to a much lower level person. When you've been spending so much time in very focused research, you tend to talk in that language, and if you go back and try to, so there are volunteer opportunities where you can, work with a middle school program or something like that. Look for things there where you actually are forced to think about your thoughts, put them in simple language, and then you can find a place in the middle there.
Yeah.
I have a question. Next question.
Sorry. That's all right. I was going to echo something you said. Real quick, at Meredith College, we actually do have some relationships with, one was with Duke, we have a preparing future faculty, and actually have a PFF mentor right now, or mentee, I guess is how it works. But that individual is working with me. We're talking about developing maybe 1 or 2 courses, classes that they could teach, covering a section. I actually have another one at NC State who's finishing up, as well as another one at UNC who's going to start. So it is important. That experience is important. I mean, it's kind of like research. If you have great publications, our focus is teaching. That's our primary gig, and so it's nice that you do the research, but we really need that teaching experience. That's our focus. I mean, it's, kind of like it's 70% 30 is what it is at our institution, but it's a lot more than 70%. It's like 90%. If you're not a good teacher at our school, you're not going to keep your job. That's the critical thing. So that experience and that demonstration that you can do it is a must. And I would say guest lecturing, looking at adjunct opportunities if it works with your advisor to maybe teach at night. At community college is a fantastic place to kind of get your feet wet. It's a good thing to know that you don't like it as well. You need to test it out and test the waters, because we actually just hired a chemistry faculty member last year who the first year said, this is not what I want to do at all, but which was kind of tough, kind of put us in a little bit of a bind. So having that experience and letting us know that you were ready to come in is important. So if you can try to get it, look towards these things. I'm not sure if the PFF relationship is through the postdoc office? Or?
PFF is run through the Duke Graduate School, and that's where graduate students and postdocs can find information about it. You have to apply. 25 graduate students are accepted each year, and 5 postdocs. But it is a competitive process. So go to the grad school website and you can learn more.
And speaking of the PFF program, we've been involved. There used to be 2 different versions of the PFF program here, and I've been involved with the biology one since 1999, and then they got merged. But we always had an excellent experience with the PFF students, and they often, they would work with one of us during the semester, but often we hired PFF students for teaching. The benefit of our situation is that we hire a lot of adjuncts, and we can just give you a lab section so that you can get your feet wet in doing a lab and following the person who's writing all the lectures and giving the lectures, instead of taking on a full-blown course all at once. And that's a very nice way to get involved in it. And we've hired many PFF students to do whole courses as well as just labs. And often it's people who aren't even mentoring at Durham Tech, but they've talked to somebody who's talked to somebody, and then we end up hiring them for anywhere from 3 to 6 to 9 contact hours. A lot of it depends on where you are in your research and what your advisor is going to let you do. But we also have night classes, which doesn't cut into your daytime research.
I know at Elon and the search committees that I've sat on, folks who have gone through PFF program, the SPIRE program at UNC, or something equivalent where they've been, tend to stand out. We know that there's a dedication to teaching. We know the kind of training, and think you've been thinking about it, even if you haven't gotten you don't have a ton of in-class experience at that point. We know there's that desire, and you've had the time to actually sort of process and be realistic about what it's going to take at that point. I thought it was interesting when I was going through the interview process. I interviewed at this one small liberal arts college up in the Northeast, and in the middle of that interview, it struck me that actually, because I had gone in there really stressed out about the fact that I didn't have the level of teaching experience going in there that I thought I was going to need. And as I talked to everyone in there, they had all been in the same boat, and that really sort of struck me. To get there, you have to go through the big research programs, and research is kind of a big deal, and still something that you have to sell, no matter, I think, what the school these days. Doing what you can, all the little things that we've been mentioning here, I think that to demonstrate any way that you can, that you care about teaching, is going to make a big deal.
This might apply necessarily to everybody until you get to the level where you're actually having an interview. But I would suggest if you get to that point, at some point sit down and create a draft syllabus or a mock syllabus of the course that you would picture yourself teaching in the first year. just so you have the ability to carry on a conversation about the types of things you might want to teach. And if you don't know what a syllabus is, well, you've seen them all the time, and a lot of the students just said, oh yeah, that thing, and then they refer to it when they need to know what their grades are. But those end up being sort of your map for how you lay things out. And so if you actually start thinking in that line, then when you have the conversations later, you'll be able to convince people that you are actually have been thinking about teaching and not just strictly thinking about research.
And maybe if we could back up a little bit from there. So when you were screening applicants for an interview, what stands out for you? What gets people tossed in the no pile right away?
Well, I've been on a couple of search committees and chaired one, and for us at both institutions where I've done that, we really place a huge emphasis on teaching, and that and again, like what's been said, that you've thought about teaching, that you're interested in it. And honestly, one of the things that goes is there's very little mention. Well, there's two things. One is you should know something about the school you're applying to, not just the blanket shotgun approach. Where at Meredith, it's an all-women's college, so if there's no mention of that aspect, we've had candidates who we get in the phone interview and are surprised to find out it is an all-women's college. It's a little shocking, so that's not a good way to go. But you should have an indication of where you're going and what the level of students, to get an idea, handle on that. But also, applications that are very research, this is what my research is, these are all my publications, these are my grants, we don't consider them either. We're trying to find a match, we would like you to stay. And that kind of, if that's what your interests are, you're not going to get them met at schools that I've been to. Not that you can't do research, but we're not going to meet you at what you're selling yourself as. In other words, if you've got all these different funding opportunities and 30 publications over the last 10 years, you're not going to be at that same level here. You're going to be lucky just to have time to do research. I mean, the contact hours that we have at our school is pretty substantial. Most of my time is spent either in class, doing review sessions, meeting with students, giving me literally maybe about 4 hours a week to do research on my own. That's on a good week. So you have to understand that sort of aspect to it. So that's one of the things when we look at things that's very important to us on our search committees.
The second thing on my CV, first there's education, and then there's the list of classes that I teach, and followed by most of the education stuff, and then I get into the research. Now that lends a level of prominence to what I actually consider strong, and if I'm applying for a position, people will understand that that's where I am. You probably don't have that list of classes that you've taught. If you do, you put a couple of them in there, but you've probably included somewhere on your CV that list of skills that you've learned as a researcher. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to put some of the skills you think you have as a teacher of what you could actually do. So if somebody walked up to you, like right now we sort of saying, could you teach earth science, could you teach geography, could you, I mean, we have a variety of things that we would need to teach, and as a new faculty member, we've already been looking to sort of place you in a couple of those spots. So if you've already listed the types of things you have strength in, even if you haven't taught them, now remember, it's a little bit of you got to be willing to teach that class when you get there, but at least listing the things that you would be strong in, or that you would like to be able to teach, would help as one piece there, I think, is something on that says, this is what I can teach, is something that's necessary in my opinion.
And one last thing, and we just went through an accreditation process. That's SACS, which is such a joy. And it's a 2-year process, and it's one of the things that they've started to crack down on, and this is relevant to the job search, due to the University of Phoenix and these online for-profit schools, they are very particular now about the type of training students get. And so if you want financial aid, you've got to validate lots of things. One of the things they're looking at now is faculty and their graduate coursework. Are you qualified to teach this? Do you have coursework in this? And so lately, in the last few searches, we've actually had to go through a magnifying glass with the transcripts and see, are they going to cause problems when we get accredited again? Are they going, in other words, how does this work? And that's very tricky for our international graduate students and PhDs that are applying for the job, because you have to get this sort of transfer between what a European, for example, transcript would be and how that would translate when you're looking at this accreditation stuff. So that is something that you have to pay attention to, because you may have lots of experience teaching botany and have done some botany work at some level, but if you haven't had a formal course, it could create a problem for the hiring institution when it comes to accreditation, at least these days.
Yeah, I would echo that with the international student piece. I would recommend you go through the process of getting your courses translated. I know there's services that do that ahead of time, because there's a good chance that your application may just be moved over because that's too much trouble for the committee to actually look at. I hate to say it, but that may be the case, and it's probably worth it for you to go ahead and put in that information there so that if it's needed, it's already there.
I'll say one thing that's, with all these things that are coming up, I think your cover letter on an application is really, you want to carefully craft that one, because I think that really sort of outlines everything right there. You know, when we look at these things, you know, do they immediately launch into research, and then eventually there's this little bit about teaching at the end? That doesn't tell me that that person's really that interested in the teaching. They're really good at research, and they may not be happy here when they get here. Okay, you can provide your own interpretations on these things. Help us understand, for example, you know, what are the realms that you're prepared to sort of help the department in? What can you offer? New courses, perhaps. What are the courses that you could contribute that they already have? You do a little background research, see what kind of courses are in there. You know, really build up the picture for the group that you're applying to at that point.
You see, at the community college, we couldn't care less about the cover letter. Frankly, institutionally, I care, but up until 2 years ago, we had an HR director who would throw cover letters away. We have a very clear 4-page application form, and that's all she wanted to see. And most community colleges have a very similar, you know, minor variations on a very similar application form. So, you know, it very clearly lists the things that you've done. You know, it's just like applying for a job. What are your last 5 positions or whatever? References matter some, but what really mattered was the transcript, because we will not hire you without 18 graduate hours in the field that you wish to teach. So, you know, when he's talking about SACs, we're very SACs driven. And you must demonstrate, you know, the fact that your course might have been called botany, but it has a BIO prefix, it better have a BOT prefix. You know, we've relaxed that a little because a lot of schools are now going to more general degrees that, you know, it's a biology degree with an emphasis in something. So we're getting a little better at making these connections, but we require a master's degree. Having a PhD is no benefit, and you must demonstrate 18 graduate hours of coursework in the field that you plan to teach. We also require 2 years of demonstrated teaching, and that generally gets a little dicey with just saying you've been TAs. So that's the benefit to actually teaching. Teaching a lab for us is equivalent to being a TA at a university, but we're actually paying you. So if you've got the opportunity to co-teach with an instructor, you'll get a much stronger recommendation. We do have a new HR director, and now we do pay attention to cover letters a little bit. But again, you have to tailor it to the institution and know some of the lingo and some of the things that community college stresses. Something called an open door policy, which doesn't mean you leave your office door open so students can come in and ask you questions. You know, the idea is that it's open to anyone at any level, and you know, we have a variety of courses that will help you meet whatever needs you're trying to meet, whether it's, you know, continuing education or remedial coursework or actually pursuing a transfer degree. So you need to know the lingo, and you need to put that in the cover letter, but really more than a page isn't going to impress us. And listing your publication, you know, submitting, we get a lot of people that have been downsized from the park, and they've done 15, 20 years of research, and they're listing publications and patents, and that's nice. But that doesn't tell us you can communicate with students. So you have to tailor these very specifically to the institution.
What about teaching statements and research statements?
We have the last page of our application is your teaching statement.
What about the other schools? Are those good? Do you ask for teaching statements and research statements? Both?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, those are both important. I know at Elon, and again, the cover letter in our case sort of sets us up for when we get to the teaching statement and the research statement. And again, it's kind of, you know, you craft both those sort of trying to understand the context of what you're going to be going into. The teaching statement means a really big deal with Elon. You know, when we're evaluated, as those of us who are there already, it's first and foremost the teaching. And so, you know, you can be guaranteed you're going to, that'll be the first thing that gets looked at in a place like that. And being realistic again in the research side of things, telling us all about the great research that you've done is fantastic, but can you also can you make us feel good about the fact that you're going to be coming to a very different environment? You can't be sequencing genomes where we're at, okay? Things are going to be much more limited. You may only have one bench of space, maybe a certain low-level startup that, is, really hard to compare to what you might have here at Duke. How are you going to get up and running? Do you have some sort of a picture in your head of what are some appropriate level kinds of questions? And I know many of us, those are some of the things, we started little side projects as postdocs with that intent, to have these things that we could point at and say, that would be something that we could take with us in there. And so, we read those pretty carefully and actually pick those apart pretty well.
We do ask for a teaching statement. I think the interesting thing is here, it's again a little bit about knowing, but you may not be able to know everything. My institution's a little bit different in the fact that both of the institutions, all the institutions here seem to be talking about being very dedicated to teaching. My institution is kind of not certain yet exactly what they want to be doing at the moment. Because they're really aspiring to get to that R1 level. We just created our first PhD program, things along those lines. So there are definitely faculty who are interested in research, and that's about it. My new department chair, pretty much straight up on the research side of things. Whereas, on the other hand, we have very heavy teaching loads, and we're being asked by the upper level administration to make sure we meet a lot of these particular things. So a lot of it really depends on who's reading it, right? If I'm on the reading committee, I'm going to be all about that teaching philosophy. If my department chair's on the reading committee, he's not looking at it at all. So it's a little bit dicey knowing exactly what you want. One of the things I would encourage you to think about is there a way that you can tie your research back to the undergraduate experience? Because that's the thing that the people who want to do research says, well, research lends to the undergraduate experience. And that's the way it works at an R1 university, is that you have this whole setup where there's somebody who's working with postdocs, who's working with upper level graduate students who are working with, and everybody's sort of involved in this large, everybody can be part of the research. It's a lot harder to do when it's just you and undergraduates and maybe a master's student who might be able to be your TA. However, that isn't to say that you can't take your research and bring elements of it into your undergraduate teaching. And if you can find a way in your teaching philosophy to talk about how the wonder of what you decided to research is going to trickle its way into your classroom, that would make you stand out to me, because then you're really understanding what the job is, what the connection is.
And those teaching statements, really make it personal. We have someone that goes over teaching statements almost exclusively on always these committees, and they become very adept at seeing stuff that seems to be somewhat canned and packaged. There's lots of material available. You really need to make it personal to you, and that usually comes through pretty well that that's the case. And as far as a research statement, one of the things that we look for, we have zero startup. We have our autoclave is out. We have a autoclave that is broken right now. So you have to kind of, you really, doing science doesn't have to be doing cutting edge, sequencing 750,000 sequences at a shot. You can do very good science with very little resources, and I would encourage you to consider how you could start up a research program with zero to no budget. You also have to remember these are undergraduates. They have a full course load. They do not have graduate level time to commit to their projects, and so it's not only balancing your time with their time, and so they can only commit so much amount of time. Now, as they stick with it, they tend to work a little bit better with that, but these are the types of things that, at least from a research statement, you should probably be aware of and kind of address. Don't talk about all the great things that you do, but you may come at Meredith College and say, oh, we have one thermocycler, right? That's it, and then the autoclave's down today, so good luck.
So just say, because I think this would be an interesting, how many hours a week do students spend on average at Meredith? I'll tell you, at Elon, it's about 3 hours a week.
Yeah, and so that's exactly, we have basically...
Think of what you can accomplish in 3 hours a week.
1 credit hour of research for them means 3 hours in the laboratory.
That's right.
And most of them are taking 1 to 2 credits maximum. And, and they can be crazy. We now have crazy laws. This is just strange. The whole deal with the UCLA professor who's being sued for one of their students had a bad accident, got burned, and ended up dying. And he got criminal charges pressed against him. And so far, they're going through with it and saying he was responsible. That's created a lot of stress for us. I mean, we're not UCLA. We have very little funding. And so now it's become they can't work in the evenings by themselves. There has to be a faculty member. Well, I have kids. I have, not much of a life, but I do have a life outside of this. So I have to go home, and so my students can no longer do work at night by themselves. So it's a new pressure, but that's a great point about thinking about how the research is going to go with a very limited help per week.
Most of the students at Central have full-time jobs in addition to tearing on their full-time loads. I shouldn't say full-time jobs. Most of them have a job. Some of them have full-time jobs. And we're always fighting the battle of how are you going to be able to commit just to your time that you spend in classes. So finding somebody who's willing to actually spend time doing research. Now, I'm okay in the fact that we have master's students that we do have just enough money to make do that. But trying to publish a master's document is difficult because they get 2 years, they get just to the point where they can discover something, and then you got to graduate. So that is kind of limited on there. So again, trying to find that balance between how you're going to carry on bits of research. One thing that some faculty do is they turn a little bit to pedagogical research, to leveraging your teaching with how well it's being effective in the classroom. And I know there are places at Duke that actually do a lot of that. I'm forgetting exactly the name of the program, but I know that there's a place where they actually do a fair amount of that research, and you can learn how to do flipping the classroom, which you may or may not have heard of, and stuff like that. Well, maybe one of the things you can do is, if you're going to be doing a lot of work in your teaching, is spend a little bit of time figuring out, okay, how can I publish that work so I'm leveraging both, and as a means of getting started with some level of research while you're teaching and still being able to focus on the teaching.
I think you're referring to the Center for Instructional Technology.
Right, and it's different on every campus, so I can't remember. But yeah, I know that center, for example, has some of those tools, and they could also potentially tell you what their faculty do there and what types of things are available there. And I'm not saying that's for everyone. I mean, I keep intending to do it, and I don't like to necessarily, the science of gathering in social science is very different than it is gathering in the hard sciences, so it's a lot harder and not for everyone. But it is a way of sort of leveraging both research and teaching in one chunk.
So what's a typical teaching load?
For us, it's 18 to 21 contact hours a semester for full-time instructors. So for science, that would basically be 2 courses. Lecture would be 3 hours a week, and we do our own labs. We do not have TAs, which I think is an absolute benefit, because you know what the students know and don't know. You're not relying on different TAs to carry out the lab activities. It gives you almost built-in office hours with them because you're with them. And so we do 40 people in lecture, 2 20-people lab sections, and that's 9 contact hours. And then you do another class. And so typically it's like a biology and an anatomy class, or a biology and a microbiology class. So as chair, I carry half a load, so I only do 9 contact hours.
At Elon, a typical semester might be 2 lecture sections and 2 lab sections. We also teach our own labs there and have some degree of prep support in there, depending. For the advanced labs, it's a little bit tricky because it's only undergraduates. A lot of them haven't taken the course, so it's hard to find someone who's appropriate to do that. But yeah, I guess that's
Full course load at Central is 4 courses a semester. So sometimes there is some possibility of, if you have like something that has a lab, you can teach 1 section and then both of the labs, and that would be considered 2 courses. But basically, and our graduate courses usually count a little bit more. So maybe you have to do 1 graduate course and 2 courses on a lighter semester, but usually it's 4. The biggest thing is the number of different preps, and depending on the preps being how many different main classes you teach. And for small departments, if you come into a small department, you're probably going to have multiple preps where you're going to have to prepare 4 different classes. Whereas if you're in a much larger department, you might be able to get away with often what we'll do is, like, okay, you're going to teach 4 sections of earth science or 4 sections of one thing to sort of get rolling. But that makes a really big difference on how much work you have to do, particularly in your early career, how many different courses you have to prepare for.
And for us, it's pretty much the same. People with a little bit more administrative duties, department head, get half loads. For us, a typical is between 18 to 24, with 24 being an exceptional overload in the sense that they're piloting a new course, there's 3 extra hours on that. So it has to usually be balanced in the next semester by going low with 18. But again, if you have committee work, if you're the program director for a particular program, for example, we have an environmental sustainability program, and that's our program coordinator gets a reduction of 3 hours, which is nice. But it's a pretty big thing, and for us, advising is a big component. We have a huge number of majors in our department, we're the largest department on campus, but we're just about average in faculty. So the average advising load for us, which has to be factored in when you think about this, is about 40 per faculty member, which means there's a period during advising, which is for us a 2.5-week process, where basically every free moment you're not in the classroom is dealing with advisees. And we have internal struggles because the English department may have 10 majors. We have some faculty that get upset and claim they will never take more than 5 or 6 advisees. And then the administration decides that this is an area of focus we need to improve upon, and therefore we need to have these hour-long meetings with them. Well, we can't do that. And so it's kind of, I hate to say it's more than just the teaching, but it really is. The advising eats up a lot of my time as well. And again, which comes back to doing the research, so it is a balance.
I would say for as little time as you will have your students in the lab, you can expect yourself to be in there that little as well. I think in this scenario that we have up here.
So how about the interview process? Is it, you start with a phone screen, then is it a 1 full day after that, more than 1 day? Do you expect a research talk or a job talk or a teaching demonstration?
Our most recent, we've actually been through this process a lot recently because we had a couple of openings that came out, professor retired, professor died, a few other things that actually happened. So the process is mostly there's phone screen. I think our most recent we did phone screen. I think they actually did 2 phone screens in the most recent one. And then we brought 2 candidates in. Usually it's 2 or 3, but it really kind of depends on our funds at the time to come in and actually have an interview. Our interview consisted mostly of chances to talk with the dean, chances to talk with the department chair, chances to meet with the faculty, ask questions, and sort of feel an interview. And then we had one, it wasn't necessarily teaching, but it still was a teaching test. Like it was a presentation to the assembled faculty and students. If you're only allowed 1 opportunity to present, consider it to be a teaching test as much as it is a presentation of your research, unless you know that it's a heavy research position. We had 2 candidates, one was stronger than the other. The one that was strongest completely blew it by basically reading her notes through the whole thing. And you basically need to engage the audience and tell them, even if it's whatever your research actually is, you need to figure out a way to communicate that in a way that makes the students in the room excited. At least that's in our situation.
We have the same thing. We actually require them to teach a course, and our search committees try to find a course that's out of their comfort zone, something that their background is not in, to see how they approach that. What actually can work to your advantage, because you have to brush up on it, and it allows you to kind of distill it to the basics, which is what the audience is. A very important question to ask is, who am I presenting this to? You need to know if it's freshman intro level, if it's an upper level class, and have an understanding of what they would know. Ask lots of questions about that particular job talk to get as much information about what level it needs to be approached. Absolutely being engaged, and you can get pedagogical ideas about how you can do that. So any little bit like that helps you to stand out as well. And we are, again, a lot of it's funding driven, so the longer distance, you may have less of a chance to get a job longer distance these days due to whatever budget crisis that particular college is facing. We're very limited into the Southeast about who we can bring in. We cannot fly people. We almost very rarely can we afford to put them in a hotel in the last few years just because of the budget expense. Whereas when I came, it was not the same situation. So the economy has a lot to do with it. And lastly, the interview process with faculty. This is an important thing. We've had candidates mess this up prodigiously. They meet with every faculty member for half an hour in the department. It's a long, any interview is going to be a long, tiring experience. But you do meet with the faculty member every hour. You better have questions for every single faculty and answer the same question for every single faculty. So at the end of the day, we somehow I've always seemed to be that person. And do you have any questions for me? No, it's all been answered. Well, that doesn't make me feel like you care about engaging me at all. So, and that's not a good thing. You have to kind of be fresh for the whole 8 to 10 hour process. You have to go to dinner sometimes. And again, it's all an interview, but as you do that, always have the same list of questions and ask it every single time to the same faculty, to every different faculty member, to let them know you're engaged and interested.
And they will talk to each other all throughout the day and all that. And, oh, they asked you that question? Okay. How do they answer? Is it consistent? At the beginning of the day, you were talking about a certain research trend that you wanted to sort of work on. By the end of the day, you would change your tone as you adjusted, sensing that that person didn't really know what they were going in.
Do you tell them who they're meeting with? I've been to some interviews where just go and then they're like, well, we're going to get you set up with this guy. This guy's like, well, a heads up would have been nice. But do you guys do that when you bring in?
It will give you a sense on how organized the department is.
Yeah.
My guess is you probably wouldn't find out in our department who you were meeting with.
Okay.
Part of it also has to do with the upper level administration. Like, the dean says, okay, well, you got one coming in, okay, maybe I'm available at 1, maybe I'm available at 4. So it isn't necessarily always a reflection of the department either, as much as the administration being available on a particular day, and you have to be able to flow with that a little bit.
And you should probably go through and read every faculty member of the department and be prepared. I think that's the biggest thing. Is we always tell them when a candidate comes in and says, oh, I read about you on the website, this is what you do, that makes the interviewer feel really comfortable with you as well. But you can't over-prepare for this. I think that's the key thing, because that happens frequently, because dean's schedules and vice president schedules can get really hairy for them. And that's not, interviewing you is not their priority for the day, which it is for the department, but, and a lot of times administration leaves the department in a lurch. Well, almost always they leave the department in a lurch.
And at our place, it's much different. It's a very scripted interview. You are given 2 hours. You have, we assign you a topic, and you have a 15-minute teaching presentation. We've had people who failed to read the email and showed up and didn't even know they were supposed to teach. This is not somebody who was seriously wanting this job. We have very scripted questions. I've been on interviews at 3 different, I've participated in interviewing people at 3 different community colleges. They're similar and different. There's some very unique things at each institution, but what's pretty much, you know you're going to get the standard questions, describe your weaknesses, describe your strengths, how do you like to relate to your boss. I mean, you can read those things online. But your teaching demo makes a big difference. And with only 15 minutes, you better be prepared. You need to have very clear, one of the issues, we give you a topic and people feel like, oh, if I had a whole hour, I would say all this. But we're giving you 15 minutes, and it's very uncomfortable to act like we're idiots and you're doing just your 15 minutes, because you want to impress us with all you know in that 15 minutes, but you need to treat it like it's a class. And you could pack a little extra info in there, but you really need to, ask questions, engage us like students, recap, do some little interesting, innovative things. We just hired 2 people in July, so we had 46 applicants. We interviewed 8 people. With 2-hour shots, we could do more than, we're not spending a whole day with everybody. And some of them were just truly dreadful. Just truly. I'm just astonished these people consider themselves instructors. And some of them were just amazing. They had done their homework, they had looked at the courses we offer, they could say, I'd be very comfortable teaching this and this and this, and when I teach this, I generally stress, so they really knew what we taught and where they would fit in. But, you got to be humble, because we're going to tell you what you're going to teach. The new people don't come in and cherry pick their courses, so you have to strike that very interesting balance. But with only 15 minutes, you better be on top of your game.
One can be a minor thing, but it can be very major. If you're very tech heavy, you need to have a little bit of redundancy built into your system. You know, you show up and you hand us a thumb drive, and it turns out that the system that you have, whatever, usually most things are pretty good, but if you show up and you hand us a thumb drive and we can't do anything with the thumb drive,
Yep.
then
You're on DocX and we're on Windows XP.
Okay, I mean, yes, there are things like that that happen, and how you handle it is huge. If you handle it with aplomb, you're going to get all sorts of stars. You actually kind of hope for that if you can handle it. If you can't handle it, then people are going to say, guess what happens in your classroom about 3 times a semester? Potentially.
We got the old chalk talk. Yeah.
Right, so you have to be able to recover from that. So just be aware that if that's the case. Similarly, if you're in the new, there's a lot of demand for people that put a fair amount of tech into their classroom and what they do. If you have some artifacts already generated, have the ability, you won't be able to show everybody when you're in your interview, but those should be links that are somewhere maybe on your, on your CV and or stuff, so people can go, and then somebody who really is interested, well, let me go see what they actually have. Oh, wow, those are pretty cool, right? If you've already put those into place, have those ready, and at the end of your talk, see my, for more of the talk, go see this. And if you started to generate those artifacts, I hadn't as a grad student, so I don't, expect you necessarily will have. Of course, that was 15 years ago, but yes, if you do, start having those things in place that you can reference them.
And always one last thing, is always be on top of your game for the interview. Don't, just because it's a school that you're not interested, the amount of networking and communication we have between everybody. We had a candidate a couple years ago from a big research university local, I won't give the name, but it starts with a D. Great on paper. She knew someone in the school, which was a big reason why she kind of got in. Again, didn't have a good interview with me or a couple of other faculty members, and I was talking to Kathy, I think, over the summer about this, because we were teaching at State at the time, kind of grasping that. She said, oh, that individual was in it, we were going to interview them, they never bothered to show up for the interview. Right? And that was...
Didn't even call us,
yeah.
We're all sitting there.
That's so wrong.
And this person was, some people loved this individual in the search committee, and a couple of us weren't so hot about her. That comment kind of pushed it easy at that point. They're like, didn't show up? Okay, well, that's not very professional. And that was the question, is the professional level of professionalism, and that one point, talking to somebody at a different school, was the tipping point, and ended it right there.
So at Elon, a typical search, I'll try to throw in some different complementary angles to what we've had on this process so far. 30 to 100 applicants coming in, depending on the search and the specificity of the title. From that, we'll whittle it down to a short list. You're often, the short list of 6, maybe 7 people. You're usually contacted at that point, and you're told that you're on a short list, and we'll usually set up sort of a follow-up interview. That could be a phone interview, it could be a Skype interview. Skype's becoming a little bit more popular now. Some interesting things about that too. Choose your background wisely. There's been some amazing interview stories that I've seen recently. Once you've gone through that interview, usually the search chair, and that's the person that you're communicating with throughout the whole thing, usually not the chair of the department, the chair of that particular committee, will let you know what's going on, and then usually 2, 3, on odd occasions maybe 4 will be invited onto campus. At Elon, you are not asked to do a research talk. Matter of fact, I found this really interesting. Of all the schools that I interviewed at, and there were others in there that were also small liberal arts kind of places, Elon was the only one that did not schedule me for a research talk. And that sent a big, strong message to me right there. I know where the priorities are here, and I talked about my research. I made sure that they knew I had some plans, but I knew when I was coming in there, first and foremost, I got to demonstrate the teaching on there. And in this case, it was a set class in one of our introductory classes. Usually is what you'll get, and it's usually you're sent the material as far as the general content, and then you have to figure out how you can present it and things like that. And that makes a big difference by all means. The whole time while you're interviewing, we're asking ourselves and talking to each other, can we picture this person in front of the students? When a student comes in and talks to this person, what kind of experience are they going to get? Are they going to be, is this going to be a good interaction? We've had some folks who have killed the talk. They did a great teaching session in there, and then, we invite students to lunches as well, and and then they sit there the whole time. They never talk once to the student. They're always talking to us. If someone's in there in an interview, they're in there for a reason, and you need to pick up on those things. So.
How about the negotiation? It sounds like you're not negotiating for startup packages. Can you negotiate salary, teaching load, and what would be a typical salary for a new hire at your institutions?
I'll speak for our situation. And first of all, one of the things that's true about public institutions is you can find out what the salaries that everybody makes are online. I would strongly suggest you go and find that out so that when you're trying to negotiate for something more than the department chair, you'll understand why you don't get the job.
But again, you can actually look up through the Chronicle, I think, CUPA standards, which is college, university, professor, I can't remember the exact title, but it gives you a good ballpark of where that is. You have to understand certain departments will make more than other departments, and also factor in your benefits. That can't be understated. You may not be getting as much, but you may be having your children with free tuition. That's a huge expense. I mean, that's like a bonus at the end of this. And you also have to bear in mind that your first job the first academic job may not be your permanent job, but it will help you build up that credibility so you can get bigger and better jobs. So be a little open with yourself. What's acceptable to you? Don't place yourself up too high on a pedestal, because jobs are tight right now, and people would kill for any position at many levels, because we see the same applications coming through every time there's an opening. So you have to balance what's important.
One thing I think you should be really aware of when you are negotiating that you can negotiate for is finding out if there's any limits to what you can make as a researcher or as a consultant while you're actually teaching. I was in a discussion with a colleague of mine who said UC San Diego, and he was like, oh, no, I can take a third of my time and put it toward consultation, and I can get whatever I want on consultation. So it would be important to understand what that limit is, whether or not you're free to earn whatever you want during your summer, or whether or not you're limited by some rules that are in place because of the institution. And that's something that should affect your decision. Whether or not you can negotiate much with that is a different story, but should definitely affect your decision. Particularly if you have a very in-demand research and or the ability to consult on that research. You don't want to be saying, oh, you can only get paid $10,000 for this when the market's bearing much more than that.
Does anyone ever apply for grants? Does that come into play?
There's also a lot of small grant things that you can do. NC Space Grant was my first grant. It was only $10,000. It was mostly for a little bit of class development, a little bit of buy myself out for a month in the summer and things like that. So you don't have to necessarily go out and knock it out of the park when they say a grant. That grant could be something that's relatively small, but then the difficulty is whether or not it's worth getting the grant with all the administrative work that you actually have to do. $10,000 goes away really quickly when you're running around campus trying to make sure the $10,000 goes in the right place. So I would say yes, but it really depends on what you end up being there for, what the expectations are.
I think Garrett brings up an interesting point that's worth noting on here too. There's an awful lot of places out there, sort of in the sort of levels that we all represent here, that are stuck between being a teaching place and a research place. I think many see the prestige of the research and they want to be moving there. Many of the places I interviewed at in the process, I was really struck by that, and the story all seemed to be the same on there. The university is making a big push towards research right now. They don't have the infrastructure in place, and meanwhile now, then a lot of those faculty at those places were very unhappy because they were stuck in between this nowhere's land of having to do all the scholarship that comes along with that, but then meanwhile they haven't adjusted any of the teaching loads, the support for TAs and things like that. So definitely look for those little signs out there. I really had thought for a long time a master's level institution is where I want to be, but man, those, honestly, they sound kind of hellacious, to be honest with you. They just by default, they're stuck right in the middle, and they're very, no offense.
No, that's exactly where, and I've started to talk about, I think the old educational model used to be, okay, so here's what you learned when you got out of high school, and here's where sort of the cutting edge of research was, and this was college, right? Well, in the past, whatever, 50 years, our level of research has gone crazy, and our level of what we learned in high school has moved up, but not as much. And so R1 universities get the best students, and they can actually work up here. But there's a lot of training that needs to happen, and a lot of the demand right now, particularly from legislatures, get jobs. When you're done, you need to get a job. You need to get a job. Well, training people for jobs in a large set of jobs is a very different thing than training people to be able to do research or be ready to go to research things. And I don't think as a nation or even, even globally, we've figured out that now the gap is wide enough that it's a hard thing to ask faculty or anybody to do both. And I think that's why we're having the University of Phoenixes and all these other large places, because effectively what they're doing is they're taking and building up that from high school up until the point where you really can be an effective researcher level student. Now my vice chancellor for research will shoot me for saying this in public, but that's pretty much, that's kind of the philosophy where it is. So yes, you may find yourself in that expectation where I'm working with somebody who basically got out of high school with C's. And at the same time, I'm supposed to turn around that afternoon and do something that a PhD is your contribution to the world. All research papers supposed to be something brand new. And I'm supposed to flip back and forth between those. It's extremely difficult to do, and that's why I'm a little envious of the teaching institutions or the institutions that really do say. I mean, there is some benefit there. Really listen to what the institution wants. And then when you go into it, be really aware, ready for that. And those that are in the middle, try to find out where they're going, because there is going to be a lot of expectations of
Time and energy.
knowing the institution's important there. I do have to say, being in an HBCU, that we do have there are some groups and pools of money, like you say, in South Dakota, right? There are different places that actually can qualify for different pools of money because of the demographics of the population you serve, because of the area of the country you serve, because of the fact that you're doing science or doing certain things. So being a little bit aware of that, if you know what you kind of want to look for grant money in, it might be helpful to know the type of institution that is positioned to do that.
Can you speak to the tenure track, like how that works in a primarily teaching institution?
It's different. Every school is different, I'll tell you that. And it depends on, you really need to kind of know that, and that's good questions to ask administrators when you go on for the interviews, because they are substantially different. You should look to see how many tenure track faculty there are in a department. You should look to see how many associate professors and full professors there are. For instance, we had a really interesting thing right before I went up for tenure. Given the economy, again, we're a tuition-driven institution. We rely heavily on the tuition dollars that our students pay to basically fund the university. Because of the way that we were structured, the board of trustees really were interested to see what they could do to be flexible. And so one of the things they were thinking about implementing was sort of a freeze of tenure when you get a specific percentage of faculty that are tenured in a department. That, of course, is tough if you have 3 people in the department. You may have a third member of the department who's been there for 20 years not being able to get tenure because they would exceed the percentage. So that was actually negotiated where that's not the case. So at our institution now, we don't give tenure track. Most of the positions now are not tenure track. That doesn't mean they won't lead to tenure track. But I understand the board's point of view. They need flexibility to do what they have to do, and it's easier to not renew a faculty member's contract if they're not tenured, because if it's tenured, then litigation can come. So they were trying to position themselves to do what's best for the university, but it was sort of at the expense of one of the perks of working at a school and getting a low salary is that you do have some sort of job security. So that's been kind of turned a little bit on its head, but it seems to be coming back down to where it's not as bad. But typically, like I can speak at Meredith, you typically will apply after, I believe it's 6 years. So I had 3 years coming in, so I could expedite that. You had to serve at least 3 years at the institution, so after my 3rd year I could go up for tenure. And then you put together a minor, bigger than my thesis packet that took a lot longer to write than my thesis, and you have to submit this. It goes to a committee member of your peers. At least ours, our department signs off on it, and if it goes there, then it goes to what we have, the tenure and promotion committee. And this is where it gets really interesting, is because you have people from different disciplines evaluating your professional career as to whether or not you should have tenure. And there's always been this conflict. Publications, well, the English department doesn't think the science departments publish that much, but they also, I mean, not to be glib about it, but they get a pen and paper and there's their expense in theory. But I mean, they have expenses and whatnot, and they publish regularly, but it's a different thing, obviously, than in the sciences. And we're not supported to do that kind of work. So it's a lot of political navigating by, so you really need advocates on these committees to kind of explain the situation to them. And once you make it to there, then it goes to administration, they sign off on it, and then it actually gets finalized by the Board of Trustees. So these individuals who meet at night and who knows where, secluded places that make these big decisions, ultimately have the decision. But from all accounts, they just rubber stamp what the final decision is based on all the upper levels of management. And so that's how the tenure process works here. Ours was big emphasis on teaching. More than the professional development, you have to have some, but what's your teaching level? And so interesting things crop up, so you really need to be a good documenter of every little thing that you do, which I'm not very good at. And that helps you in the job search. Every little bit of experience that you have, you should document it and put it in a folder, because you can always use that to sell yourself.
Spoke at Duke one afternoon.
That's what happened.
And it was before George was here.
Yeah.
We have no tenure. We work on one-year contracts. We're funded annually by the legislature, and we cannot offer a job for which there is no funding. So we go on one-year deals. Generally, it's fairly secure. But the budget sucks, in case you haven't been reading the newspaper. And there have been community colleges that have let 20 people go this past year. So we did not let anybody go, but we also didn't get any raises.
Elon, you know, when you start up, there's some resources available to you that very clearly define what all the expectations are going to be for each of the categories. And first and foremost, in their front and center is all about the teaching. And you know, and in the same way that you craft a cover letter, you're always thinking about how you're crafting your career in that way and how you're going to justify your presence based on teaching, scholarship, and service. And I made my little triangle because it's, again, teaching's the main pinnacle of it there. Scholarship and service are sort of falling sort of secondary in there. And so, you know, you keep that in your mindset too as you start off on these jobs, and you know, how are you going to balance your time in there. And knowing that those things are very well defined for you and the expectations, you know, you're just very careful to make sure that you address them.
I'm just going to refer, I mean, to my situation. I actually believe I got tenure mostly based on service. We kind of, there's some lines for our institution, there really are lines in the sand that say this many, you know, this many publications. I did have a couple of grant things, and I think that helped me. There were smaller administrative grants, but I got very heavily involved in the retention committee. I got involved in, I mean, I was involved in committees up and down the street. Our department merged and then needed to do this type of thing, so I was writing curriculum and doing a lot of things. And basically, I'm fairly well known on campus by people at different levels. I think that helped. My department did recommend me for promotion, but then at the college level, I didn't get it, and that was, I know, strictly based on other researchers in the College of Dental Science and Technology who sort of said that isn't enough. And to be honest, I agree with them. You know, I don't see any problem with that at that particular point. So when we said service, when you brought up that, that's the third piece that we haven't really talked about, is how are you involved on the campus and making the campus move, and what committees you sit on. And strangely, those are hugely important to getting things moving in the right direction. And to, you know, and I think that was sort of how I ended up on the, you know, with tenure, even though I didn't kind of meet the research thing. Teaching is important, but it's not well documented, or it's hard to document what good teaching is without administrators, people coming in and actually sitting in on your classrooms. And there's not enough time for most people to do that, or they're not finding the time to do that. So it really is a little more hearsay. Some departments are very involved in having peers write things about the teaching for them. I don't know how you guys' teaching evaluations go, but that really is sort of a departmental thing.
And something that you said, I think that's whenever you're thinking about any position, regardless, is one of the things you should always strive to do is think about what your niche will be at that particular institution, because it's really the niche, I think, that you serve that gets you more appreciated for the tenure. Like Garrett was saying, that his niche was the service, and you cannot undersell how important service is to the university. And so if that's your niche, that you take the lead on these types of things, the university committee values that, and you then establish yourself as an integral part to the institution, and they want to keep you. And that's the thing. It's not that they want to see how high you can jump. They really want to retain people. They want for you to be a productive person, but different people have to find different ways that they can be productive in different areas. And I think whenever you apply to a position, as much as when you apply for tenure, you have to define what you think your niche will be and what your place is. And sometimes you sort of fall into it, whether you predicted it or not. But generally, when I think about our departments and how they're made up, is everybody seems to have a particular component that they work on that benefits the department, which in turn benefits the school.
Yesterday, I spent the day putting together the schedule for the spring, asking the faculty members what they were able to teach and things like that. And I'm the person who knows how to enter it in the system and deal with that. Does that sound like administrative work? Yes, it was administrative work, but A, I get to decide my schedule every year. And at this moment, nobody wants me to go anywhere because I'm pretty good at doing that.
Okay, well, I promised we'd leave some time at the end. We've only got about 5 minutes left, unfortunately, in case any of you have specific questions. But before we break, let's thank our panelists.